Tonight, we are going to slow down together. We are going to rest inside one of the oldest stories in the Bible. It is a story about a man who walked until he could not walk any further. He lay down under a small tree in the desert. He said he had nothing left to give. What happened next is the reason we are here. He was not corrected. He was not asked to explain himself. He was given bread and water and permission to sleep, and then he was allowed to sleep again. That is the whole of it. You are allowed to be this tired. Before we begin, feel free to share what time it is and where you are listening from. It is quietly comforting to know who else is awake tonight. You do not need to know anything about the Bible to listen tonight. You do not need to believe anything in particular. You only need to be here. There is nothing to figure out. There is nowhere else to be. Nothing tonight will ask anything of you. Thank you for joining us here at Midnight Chapel. Let us begin. There is a story in the Bible about a man named Elijah. He lived a long time ago in a dry country in a hard season. There was very little rain in those years and very little kindness. But we are not going to spend our time on any of that tonight. We are going to stay with one single afternoon of his life, the afternoon when he had nothing left. Before that afternoon, Elijah had done something enormous. He had stood up in front of a whole kingdom and said what he believed he had been asked to say. He had done the difficult thing. He had done it in front of people who did not want him to do it, and it had taken everything he had. You may know that feeling from somewhere in your own life. Not the kingdom, not the crowd, but the feeling underneath it. The feeling of having spent yourself on something that mattered. The strange emptiness that arrives afterward when the thing is finished and you are still standing there, hollowed out. That is where Elijah was. And then word reached him that he was not safe, that the thing he had done had made someone angry, that it was not over after all. Something in him simply gave way. He did not argue with anyone. He did not make a plan. He did not sit down and think it through carefully. He got up and he began to walk south, away from everything. He walked out of the green country and into the dry country. Notice that no one stopped him. There is no voice in the story telling him to turn around. There is no lecture waiting for him at the edge of town. He walks, and the story simply walks with him, patiently, without comment. That patience is the first gift in this story. It is easy to miss. He walked for a day, then he walked further. There is grace in being left alone when you need it. The land changed underneath him as he went. The soft ground gave way to stone. The stone gave way to sand and dust and low gray scrub. The air grew hotter and thinner. The horizon flattened out until there was nothing to look at in any direction. He kept walking anyway. There is a particular kind of tiredness that walking does not fix. You know this kind. It is not the tiredness of the body. It is the tiredness that comes from carrying something for a very long time without being able to put it down. Elijah was carrying that. He had been faithful. He had done what was asked. And it had not made him safe, and it had not made him whole. And now he was alone in a place with no water and no shade and no one to tell. He left his servant behind at the last town. That detail sits quietly in the middle of the story, and it is worth noticing. He did not want to be seen. Whatever was coming next, he wanted to meet it by himself. So he went on alone into the wilderness. There is something in us that does this. When we are at our lowest, we go quiet. We stop answering messages. We tell people we are fine. We take the weight further out into the desert where no one has to look at it. You may have done this. Many people have. It is not a failure of character. It is what tiredness does. And here is the thing about this story that we will keep returning to tonight. Nothing in it treats Elijah's walking away as a problem to be solved. He walks into the desert, and the story does not scold him. It does not hurry him. It goes with him, one step at a time, into the emptiest place he can find. It waits. The sun moved across the sky above him. The light went from white to gold to a long, low amber. His shadow stretched out further and further ahead of him on the sand. He was not walking toward anything. He was only walking away. Notice that the story does not hurry him. At some point, he stopped counting the hours. At some point, the walking stopped being a decision and became something his body was doing on its own. The way breathing is something your body does on its own. You may know that too, the stretch of a hard week where you are not really choosing anything anymore. You are only continuing. That is where he was, out there, at the end of the day. And then the ground rose a little, and he saw a small tree. It was not much of a tree. It was a low desert shrub, the kind that grows out of stone where nothing else will, with thin branches and small hard leaves. It threw a thin, ragged patch of shade on the sand. It was the only shade for miles. Elijah walked toward it, and the walking finally ran out. Let us stay here for a moment before we go on, because this is the shape of the whole night. There is a place at the end of a long effort where you cannot go any further. It is not dramatic when you arrive there. There is no sound. There is only a very quiet stopping. That place is not a failure. It is a place many people reach. The story does not treat it as a failure either. That is the grace inside it. The story simply lets him arrive there and lets him sit down and does not say a single word about what he should have done differently. You do not have to have done everything right to be here tonight. You do not have to have handled this week well. You do not have to have been strong about it. You do not have to explain how you got so tired. You are allowed to have arrived at the tree. That is where he was. That is where we will stay for a while. There is rest in this story, and it comes very soon, and it comes without conditions. Let us rest inside the next part of it. Elijah sat down under the small desert tree. The shade there was thin and moved with the wind. It was not comfortable. It was only slightly less hot than everything around it. But it was the first thing all day that had offered him anything at all. He put his back against the low trunk. He let his arms rest on his knees, and for a while he did not do anything at all. The desert was very quiet in the evening. There is a quality of quiet in an empty place that you cannot find anywhere else. It is not the quiet of a room. It is a quiet with distance in it. You can hear the wind moving across open ground from a long way off, and then it arrives, and then it goes on past you and keeps going. He sat in that. And then he said the thing he had walked all that way to say. He said that it was enough. He said that he had had enough. He said he was no better than the ones who had gone before him, and that he did not want to carry it any longer. It was not a prayer with beautiful words in it. It was the plainest thing a person can say. It was simply, I cannot do this anymore. Now listen to what happens next in the story. Nothing. No voice comes down out of the sky. No one appears to correct him. Nothing arrives to argue with what he said, or to tell him he was wrong to say it. The desert stays quiet. The wind keeps moving. The light keeps going down. and that silence is not anger. This is the part worth staying with tonight. We are very quick to read silence as disappointment. When we say the worst thing we are carrying and nothing answers, something in us assumes the worst. We assume we have said something we should not have said. But look at what the silence is doing here. It is not arguing with him. It is letting him mean it. Elijah says he has had enough, and heaven does not rush in to tell him he is being unreasonable. Heaven lets the sentence stand. Heaven lets him be exactly as finished as he actually is. That is a kind of respect. It is also a kind of peace. There is a particular loneliness in being told you are not as tired as you feel. Many people know it. You say you are exhausted, and someone answers with a reason you should not be. You say you cannot carry it, and someone hands you a way to carry it better. Nothing in this story does that to him. The story lets him say it, and then it lets him lie down. He stretched out on the ground in the thin shade with his arm under his head. The sand still held the heat of the day. The small, hard leaves moved above him. The light through the branches went from gold to gray. He did not resolve anything first. He did not pray his way to a better attitude. He did not reach any conclusion at all. He simply lay down, unfinished, in the dirt. And that is allowed. Notice how quietly it is allowed. There is grace in that quiet. That is what this whole night is trying to say to you, in as many ways as it can find. You do not have to reach a conclusion tonight. You do not have to feel better about it first. You do not have to arrive at peace before you are allowed to lie down. Elijah did not. He lay down in the middle of the sentence. He lay down with all of it still true. Nothing had been fixed and nothing had been explained, and he lay down anyway. Notice how little is asked of him here. He is not asked to be grateful. He is not asked to remember what he has already been given. He is not asked to look at his situation from a better angle. He is asked for nothing at all. There is a very old idea underneath this, and it is worth saying plainly, and then we will go back to the story. The idea is that you are held before you are useful, not after, before. The care in this story does not arrive because Elijah earned it that afternoon. He had just told God he was finished. The care arrives anyway. That is grace. It does not wait for you to be in good condition. The evening came down over the desert while he lay there. The heat went out of the air slowly, the way it does in open country, in long stages. The sand cooled from the top down. The sky over the low hills turned deep and dark, and the first stars came out over the empty land. The small tree stood over him with its thin branches. He was somewhere very far from anyone who knew him, at the end of everything he had, with nothing settled. And he was held there. He did not know it. He was not aware of anything. That is worth saying, because you may not feel held tonight either, and that changes nothing about whether you are. Elijah felt abandoned. Elijah was not abandoned. Both of those things are in this story at the same time. The stars came out over him. The wind moved across the sand and went on. The night settled down over the desert and over the small tree and over the man lying underneath it. And then he fell asleep. That is all that happens in this part. He says he has had enough, and he lies down and he sleeps. Nothing is required of him. Nothing is fixed. He simply sleeps. Let us stay with that a little longer. There is more rest waiting in what comes next. Elijah slept under the small tree in the desert. Let us stay with that sentence for a while, because there is more inside it than there seems to be. He had just said the hardest thing he had ever said. He had told God he was finished. He had lain down in the dirt with nothing settled and nothing explained. And the first thing that happened was sleep. Not an answer, not an instruction, not a better way of looking at it. Sleep. There is a very old order of things buried in this story, and most of us have it backwards. We think rest is what you get afterward. We think you fix the problem, and then you are allowed to lie down. We think peace comes at the end of the process as a reward for finishing. This story puts rest at the beginning. Before anything is discussed, before a single word is spoken about what he should do next, before he is asked one question about the state he is in, he sleeps first. Notice what that means about how he is being seen. He is not being seen as a problem that needs solving tonight. He is being seen as a person who is tired. And the thing you give a person who is that tired is not advice. You let them sleep. The desert went dark around him while he slept. The heat that had come up off the sand all day went up into the sky and away. The stones cooled. The thin branches of the small tree moved a little in the night air and then were still. Somewhere far off there was the sound the wind makes crossing a great deal of open ground, and then even that quieted. He did not dream anything worth telling. The story does not mention his dreams. It simply lets him be unconscious in a dark place for as long as he needs. Nothing is happening. That is the point. We are not used to nothing happening. We are used to being productive even about our own recovery. We rest in order to be useful again. We sleep so we can perform tomorrow. Even our stillness has a purpose attached to it. There is no purpose attached to this sleep. He is not resting up for a mission. Nothing in the story says so. He is simply a worn-out man being allowed to be unconscious under a tree, and heaven is entirely at peace with that. You are allowed that too. You do not have to earn this night. This is not sleep you are borrowing against tomorrow. You do not owe anyone a better version of yourself in the morning as payment for it. You are simply allowed to sleep. There is grace in the ordering of this story. It gives him the body before it gives him the words. It gives him the ground and the dark and the hours before it gives him a single sentence. That is not a small thing. That is a whole theology of care, told without a word of doctrine in it. Think of how you would want to be treated on your worst night. Not corrected, not analyzed, not asked what your plan is, just covered up and left alone in the dark with someone nearby who is not going anywhere. That is what is happening under the tree. He is alone and he is not alone. Those two things are both true here, the way they were both true when he lay down. The hours went by over him. The stars turned slowly the way they do over open country, wheeling a little west through the branches. The cold came down. The sand under him gave back the last of its warmth, and then had none left to give. He did not wake for any of it. There is something tender in that image, and it does not need to be explained very much. A man at the end of himself, asleep in a place with no water, and the night simply passing over him without harm. Nothing came for him in the dark. Notice that too. The story could have put something there, a threat, a test, a voice in the night asking him to account for himself. There is nothing. The night is empty of everything except sleep and the tree and the stars going over. He is held there in the plainest possible way, not lifted up, not rescued, just lying on the ground in a dark place and not harmed and allowed to stay unconscious for as long as it takes. That is enough. That is often what it looks like when you are being cared for and cannot feel it. Nothing dramatic happens. The night simply passes, and you are still here in the morning, and something was quietly true the whole time. You do not have to feel it tonight for it to be true. Let us stay near this tree a while longer. Something is coming, and it is very gentle, and it does not ask him to wake up ready. Something touched him. That is how the story tells it. Not a voice first, not a name called out across the desert, a touch on a sleeping man in the dark. Consider how much care is in that choice. A voice would have startled him. A voice arriving out of an empty desert would have pulled him up out of sleep with his heart going. Whatever came to Elijah under that tree did not want that. So it touched him instead. Think about how you wake someone you love. You do not shout across the room. You put a hand on their shoulder and you let them come up slowly. You let them surface at their own speed. You do not want them frightened. You only want them awake enough to eat something. That is the manner of this whole scene. He came up out of sleep the way people do, slowly, not understanding where he was. The dark of the desert, the thin branches over him, the cold sand under his arm. And beside his head, there was bread. It was warm. The story is specific about that, and the detail is worth holding on to. Not bread left out on a rock, not provisions. Warm bread, baked, sitting on the hot stones beside him. And a jar of water next to it. Now stay with what does not happen here, because it is the center of the whole night. He is not asked to explain himself. Nobody says, "What are you doing out here?" Nobody says, "After everything you have been given, this is where you end up." Nobody points out that he ran, or that he left his servant behind, or that what he said under the tree was not fair. Not one word about any of it. There is only bread and water and a voice telling him to get up and eat. That is the entire message. Eat something. We are so ready to be corrected. Most of us carry an assumption that if care ever does arrive, it will arrive with a conversation attached. That we will have to sit through the part where our failure is discussed before we are allowed to be fed. This story has no such part. The correction never comes. Not in this scene, and not in the next one, and not later. It simply is not in the story. What is in the story is warm bread on a stone in the middle of the night. That is grace, and this is the plainest picture of it anywhere. It does not arrive because he improved. It arrives while he is still exactly as finished as he was when he lay down. Nothing about him had changed. The bread came anyway. He ate a little. He drank some of the water. The story does not say he felt better. It does not say he was grateful, or that his outlook improved, or that he understood anything new. It just says he ate and drank. You do not have to respond well to being cared for. That is also allowed. You can receive something kind while still feeling nothing at all, and it is not wasted on you. Elijah ate in the dark without saying a word. Notice how ordinary the help is. It is not a vision. It is not an explanation of why any of it happened. It is not a new sense of purpose delivered from the sky. It is food. The oldest and plainest care there is. The thing you give a person before you give them anything else. The thing you bring to a house where something has gone wrong, because there is nothing useful to say and someone still has to eat. That is what heaven brings him. There is something in this that quietly refuses to treat his exhaustion as a spiritual problem. He is not told his outlook is wrong. He is treated as a body that has walked all day in the heat and has not eaten. His tiredness is taken seriously, exactly as tiredness. You may need to hear that tonight. Not everything heavy in you is a failure of faith. Some of it is a body that has been going too long. Some of it is a week that took more than it gave. Some of it is simply that you have not rested in a long time. You are allowed to be looked after on that level. The night was still all around them. The bread was warm in his hands. The water was cool. The small tree stood over the whole scene with its thin, hard branches. He finished eating. And here is where most stories would turn. Here is where the instruction would come. Here is where he would be told what this was all for, and where he should go, and what is expected of him now that he has been fed. That is not what happens. We will come to what happens. It is the quietest thing in the story, and it is the reason this episode exists. He is not held to anything yet. He is only held. There is peace in this part of the night, and he does not have to feel it for it to be here. Nothing is asked, nothing is required. The bread was enough, and the bread was free. Let us go on into what came next. He finished the bread. He set down the water. And then he lay back down and went to sleep. That is what happens next. After the touch, and the warm bread, and the water in the dark, Elijah simply lay down again on the same ground under the same tree and slept a second time. Stay here with me. This is the center of the whole night. We are trained to expect something else at this moment. We expect the food to be the turning point. We expect him to stand up now, restored, and walk off with new strength and a better attitude. He does not. He eats and he is still tired and he goes back to sleep. Think about how much permission is in that. He had already been given something. He had already been touched gently and fed in the middle of the desert. By every instinct we carry, that is the moment you are supposed to pull yourself together. That is the moment you are supposed to be grateful and get moving. And he lay back down. Nothing stopped him. Notice that. Nothing in the story treats the second sleep as ingratitude. Nothing says he had already been helped enough. Nothing says the bread should have been sufficient and he ought to be up by now. He lies down again, and he is allowed to. There is a kind of tiredness that one meal does not touch, you may know it. It is the tiredness that has been building for months, underneath everything while you kept going. One good night does not clear it. One kind gesture does not clear it. Elijah had that kind. And the story does not argue with it. The night went on around him. The stars kept turning slowly over the desert. The sand held its cold. The small tree stood over him with its thin branches and did not move much at all. He slept for the second time with nothing resolved. And then it happened again. Something touched him a second time. The same gentleness, the same hand on a sleeping man in the dark. Not louder because it was the second time. Not impatient because he had gone back to sleep. The same care offered twice. That is the sentence I want to leave with you tonight. The same care offered twice, without any change in tone. Because most of us can imagine being helped once. What we cannot imagine is needing it again, and it still being there, and it still being kind. We assume there is a limit. We assume that somewhere behind the help there is a ledger, and that asking twice draws it down, and that eventually someone sighs. There is no sigh in this story. The second touch is exactly like the first. And this time there were words with it. He was told to get up and eat, because the journey ahead was too much for him. Sit with that reason for a moment. The journey is too much for you. That is not a rebuke. Read it again slowly and hear where the weight falls. It does not say you are too weak for the journey. It does not say you should be stronger by now. It does not say the problem is your capacity. It says the road is long and you are a person, and this is more than a person can carry unfed. That is an acknowledgement. Something looked at Elijah lying in the dirt, entirely spent, and did not diagnose him. It simply agreed with him. Yes, this is too much. Here is more bread. He had said the same thing himself hours earlier under this same tree. He had said he had had enough, that he could not carry it. And now the answer comes back, and the answer does not contradict him. The answer says, "You are right, it is too much, so eat." There is peace in being agreed with. Many people spend a long time trying to convince someone that their load is actually heavy, that they are not exaggerating, that it really is as much as it feels like. There is an exhaustion inside that argument that is worse than the load itself. Elijah does not have to argue. The care that comes to him has already taken his measure of it as accurate. It does not talk him down from his own report. It brings food-sized to a road that is genuinely too long. You do not have to convince anyone tonight that you are tired. You do not have to prove it. You do not have to justify it by listing what you have been carrying. You do not have to earn the right to be this worn out by having a good enough reason. It is taken as true. That is grace. In the most ordinary form it comes in. It agrees with you about your own weight, and then it feeds you anyway. He ate it the second time. He drank again. The bread was warm again. The story mentions the stones, the heat still in them, the plain fact of food prepared for a man who did nothing to deserve the first loaf, and even less to deserve the second. And then he slept some more. The desert was quiet around all of this. There was no audience. There was nobody to see whether he handled it well. There was only a man and a tree, and food appearing twice in the dark, and the long, slow hours of a night in an empty place. He was held through all of it. Not lifted out of the desert, not carried home, held in the plainest way, fed where he lay, covered by the dark, unharmed, unhurried, allowed to remain exactly where he was for as long as he needed to be there. That is what being cared for often looks like. It rarely looks like rescue. It looks like the night passing safely and something small and warm arriving twice. Notice how little he does in this entire scene. He walks and lies down and sleeps and eats and sleeps and eats and sleeps. That is the whole of his activity. Everything else in the story is done to him or for him. He is not the one doing the work here. There is rest in that, and it is deeper than the rest of sleep. It is the rest of not being the one responsible for the outcome tonight. You are not responsible for the outcome tonight. Nothing depends on your handling this well in the next few hours. Nothing depends on your reaching a conclusion before morning. The night will pass whether you solve it or not, and something will still be true when it does. Let that be enough for now. The stars went over the small tree. The cold sat on the sand. The man underneath slept his second sleep, and then his third, unfinished, unexplained, uncorrected. And the story is entirely at peace with him. That is where we will leave him for a while. He is fed. He is warm enough. He is asleep in a place he walked to in despair, and nothing there wishes him anything but rest. We will come back to him before the night is over. There is a little more to say about what that bread did and about the road that came afterward. But not yet. Let him sleep. There are other stories that say this same thing in other ways, and we will move gently through some of them now. They are quieter than this one. None of them will ask anything of you either. Let us rest inside another story. There is a night on a lake in the Gospels, and it is one of the strangest pictures in the whole book. A boat, some fishermen, wind coming down off the hills, and in the back of the boat, asleep on a cushion, the one person who could have done something about it. Let us go slowly into this one. The lake was not large. It sat low between hills, and the wind came over those hills in the evening and dropped onto the water without much warning. The men in the boat knew this. Most of them had fished that water their whole lives. They had crossed it in the dark 100 times before. They were going over to the other side at the end of a long day, the way you go home at the end of a long day. Nothing about the beginning of the trip was remarkable. The light went down, the oars went in and out, the shore behind them got smaller. And Jesus went to the back of the boat and lay down and slept. The story mentions the cushion. It is a small detail, and it has stayed in the text for 2,000 years for no reason except that someone remembered it. He put his head on something soft in the stern of a fishing boat and went to sleep. He had been talking to crowds all day. That is the thing underneath this scene that we tend to skip past. He was tired. Not symbolically tired. Tired the way you are tired after a day of being needed by a great many people, when every one of them wanted something and you gave it. So he lay down in the back of the boat like anyone would. Then the wind came down. It came the way it does on that lake, quickly, off the hills. The water changed. The boat began to take on water over the side, more than the men could keep up with, and they were bailing, and the sail was a problem, and the shore was a long way off in both directions. And he stayed asleep. Let us stay right there, because that is the picture, not the wind, the sleeping. Water coming into the boat, and the one person who could stop it, asleep in the back of it, with his head on a cushion. Notice how much this bothers us. It bothered them too. They woke him, and what they said when they woke him was not a request for help. It was the older question underneath every request for help. They asked him whether he cared. That is what comes out of a person in the middle of the night when the water is coming in. Not a plan, not a prayer, just, do you not care that this is happening? Elijah said something very like it under his tree. He did not use those words, but that is what was underneath the sentence he lay down with. That is what is underneath most of the things people say at the end of their strength. Does anyone see this? Does anyone care that I cannot do this anymore? The two stories are asking the same question from opposite ends of the Bible. And here is what is worth noticing tonight. In neither story is the question treated as an offense. He is woken up and he is asked whether he cares, and there is no anger in the answer. He gets up and he speaks to the wind, and the wind stops. The water goes flat. The whole thing takes a moment. And then it is quiet again on the lake. The story says the calm was great. That is the word that comes after. Not merely that the storm ended, but that what replaced it was large and complete and out of proportion to how quickly it arrived. A great calm on the water in the dark. Now think about what the sleeping meant all along. He was not asleep because he did not know. He was not asleep because he did not care. He was asleep because the storm was not to him, an emergency. The thing they were drowning in, he was resting in. That is not a rebuke of them, and it is not a rebuke of you. It is a picture. It says that it is possible for something to be genuinely frightening and genuinely survivable at the same time, and that the second thing is not canceled by the first. You may be in a storm that is real. Most people listening tonight are in something. The wind is not imaginary. The water coming in is not imaginary. Nothing in this story pretends otherwise, and nothing tonight is going to tell you that what you are carrying is smaller than it is. It only says that you can sleep inside it. That is the whole claim. Not that the storm is nothing, that you are held inside the storm, and that rest is possible before the weather changes. Elijah slept in the desert before anything was resolved. This is the same picture on water. Neither man had a solution when he lay down. There is grace in both sins and soth scenes, and it is the same grace. It arrives before the situation improves. It does not wait for calm to be possible. It is available in the middle, in the dark, with the water still coming in. Consider the boat itself for a moment. It was small, it was wooden. It was the ordinary equipment of ordinary working men, and it was not built for that kind of weather, and it was full of frightened people. And it held. Notice that before anything else in the scene. That is easy to miss because of what comes after. Before any word was spoken to the wind, the boat was still floating. It was taking water, and it was still floating. It carried all of them through the worst of it, while the one person they were counting on lay asleep in the back. Things hold more than we expect them to. You have probably noticed this in your own life, in retrospect, about weeks you did not think you would get through. At the time, it felt like going under. Looking back, the boat held. It is very hard to see that from inside the boat. That is not a failure of yours. Let the picture be enough tonight. A small wooden boat on dark water, wind coming down off the hills, men bailing, and a tired man asleep in the stern with his head on a cushion, entirely at peace, in the middle of all of it. That is where the story leaves us. The water went flat. The wind went out of the air. The lake settled into that heavy stillness that comes after weather, and the boat went on across in the dark, and they reached the other side. He had slept through most of it. He had not kept watch. He did not need to. You do not have to be awake for everything. You do not have to keep watch tonight. The boat is not being held together by your attention. There is rest available before the wind stops. That is the only thing this story is trying to say. Let us stay in the quiet after that, and let another story come. The wind went out of the air, and what was left was very quiet. We passed over that quickly, and it deserves longer. The storm is the part everyone remembers. The calm is the part worth lying down inside. Consider what a lake is like after weather. The water does not go smooth all at once. It flattens in stages. The high water breaks down into long, low swells, and the swells go slack, and then there is a heavy, glassy stillness that has weight to it. It does not look like water that was never disturbed. It looks like water that has been through something and stopped. That was the surface around the boat. The men stood in a few inches of water with their hands still on the ropes. Their arms were shaking a little, the way arms do afterward. Nobody was bailing anymore. Nobody had said anything yet. The boat rocked slightly, and then mostly did not. The lake had stopped, so had they. There is a particular silence in the moment after a hard thing ends, and you may know it better than you would like to. It is not relief exactly. Relief comes later. This is the blank, flat minute where your body has not caught up to the fact that it is over. They stood in that minute on the dark water. Notice that no one hurried them out of it. There is grace in an unhurried minute. Notice that nothing is asked of them here either. They had woken him in a panic. They had asked him whether he cared. By any ordinary reckoning, this is the moment where that gets discussed. It does not get discussed. The wind stops, and the water goes flat, and the story simply lets them stand there in the quiet with their shaking arms. Whatever they said in the worst of it is allowed to have been said. That is the same mercy that was under the tree in the desert. Elijah said the plainest and worst thing he had, and heaven let the sentence stand and then fed him. These men said theirs, and the wind stopped, and nobody brought it up again. You are allowed to have said things in the middle of it. Whatever came out of you during the hardest stretch of this year, the thing you said out loud in the car, the thing you said at 2 a.m. to nobody, is not being held against you tonight. It was the water coming in. It was not a verdict on you. It was only weather. It passed. The lake settled further. The stars came back out over the hills as the cloud went off, and the light of them lay along the surface in long, broken lines. The air was cold and washed and very still. Somewhere the shore was a low, dark shape with a few lights on it. They started rowing again. Eventually, nobody spoke. The oars went in. That is how it usually goes. Not a moment of triumph. Just picking the oars back up in the quiet and continuing across, wet through, toward a shore that is still where it was. They reached the other side. They were carried. They did not carry themselves. The story does not say they felt wonderful. It says something else, and it is worth sitting with. It says they were afraid, after the calm, not during the storm. That is very human, and the story does not correct it. There is a kind of fear that only arrives once the danger has passed. You get through the week, and then, on the far side of it, something in you finally shakes. Many people find they can only fall apart once it is safe to. If that is where you are tonight, you are in good company on that boat. Nothing about that is a failure. It is what a body does when it is finally allowed to stop. And here is the grace in it. The story ends there. It does not tidy them up. It does not give them a lesson to take away or a resolution to feel good about. It gives them a flat lake, a dark shore, and the crossing finished. That is peace. It asks nothing back. That is all. The great calm was not a reward for handling it well. They handled it badly by their own account. They panicked, and they accused him, and they were frightened afterward. The calm came anyway. It always does, not because of them. That is the pattern in every story we are moving through tonight. The good thing does not arrive because the person improved. It arrives on top of them exactly as they are. Bread under a tree for a man who had given up. Flat water for men who had shouted. That is grace. It does not check your conduct first. You do not have to have been graceful about this. You do not have to be calm. You only have to be here. Let the picture stay with you a moment longer, because it is a good one to sleep inside. A wooden boat on a lake that has gone completely still. Cold, clean air. Stars on the water in long, broken lines. Men who have stopped working, sitting down, not talking, being carried the rest of the way across. There is peace on that water, and none of them earned it. There is peace on that water still. The crossing finishes while you are resting. That is worth holding as you drift. Nothing tonight requires your hands on the ropes. Let us rest inside another story. There is a very short parable in the Gospels that almost nobody notices. It is 4 sentences long. It sits between larger ones, and it may be the most restful thing in the entire book. It goes like this. A man scatters seed on the ground. Then he sleeps and rises, night and day, and the seed sprouts and grows, and he does not know how. That is the whole parable. Let us take it slowly, because there is a great deal folded into something that short. Picture the man first. He is not a landowner with people working for him. He is a farmer with a small field, the kind that fed one family, in a country of small fields and stone walls. He goes out in the morning with seed in a fold of his cloak. He walks the length of the field, throwing it out in the wide, slow arc that people used before machines. The seed goes down into the turned dirt. It is a plain morning's work, and it does not take very long. And then he goes home. That is the part worth stopping on. He goes home. He does not stand at the edge of the field. He does not go back at noon to check. He does not lie awake, wondering whether the seed is doing anything down there in the dark. He sleeps, and he rises, and he sleeps again. There is rest built into the parable itself. Notice the rhythm the parable uses, night and day, night and day. It says it in the ordinary order of a life, over and over, while underground something is happening that he has no part in. The seed opens, a root goes down. A pale shoot turns and pushes up through the dirt toward a light it has not seen yet. He is asleep for all of it. Notice how little he is needed. And the parable says the thing plainly, with no embarrassment about it. He does not know how. He has farmed his whole life. His father farmed. He knows when to plant and when to cut and how the weather turns. And the actual event, the thing that makes a seed become a plant, is completely outside his knowledge and completely outside his control. He does not know how, and it grows anyway. There is enormous rest in that sentence, because most of the exhaustion people carry is not the work, it is the watching. It is the part of you that stays up, supervising an outcome you cannot actually affect from your bed. You know this feeling. The conversation you cannot stop replaying. The decision already made and already sent. The thing you are waiting to hear about, which will not arrive faster because you are awake for it. None of that is work. All of it is tiring. You can set the watching down. There is peace in setting it down. This parable takes the watching away from you. It says the growth is not on your side of the ledger. It happens underground, in the dark, at its own speed, while the person responsible for the field is unconscious. You are allowed to be unconscious tonight. Whatever you scattered this week is in the ground. Whatever you said, whatever you sent, whatever you started, it is in the dirt now, and it is out of your hands, and it does not need your attention to become what it is going to become. The field does not require your supervision. That is grace. It works while you rest. Consider how slow it all is, too. This is not a parable about a fast result. Seed in that country sat in the ground a long time before anything showed above the surface. Days of nothing. The field looked exactly as empty on the 4th morning as it had on the 1st. And it was not empty. Nothing showed. Everything was moving. That is a picture worth carrying if you are in a stretch where nothing seems to be moving. The absence of anything visible is not evidence that nothing is happening. It is what the middle of the process looks like from above ground. The farmer could not see it either. He walked past that field every day, and it looked like dirt. He He went to sleep every night without proof, and under his feet, in the dark, the whole thing was already underway. There is grace in a process that does not need you to believe in it. The seed did not require his confidence. It did not check whether he had a good attitude about the harvest. It simply did what seed does, quietly, in the dark, on a schedule that had nothing to do with his mood. Elijah was in a field like that under his tree. He thought there was nothing left. He had scattered everything he had, and he could not see a single thing growing. And what was actually happening was bread on a stone, and a night of sleep, and a road that would come later. He could not see it from where he was lying. You may not be able to see yours either. That is not a problem to solve tonight. That is simply the position of a person standing on top of a field. Let the ground do what it does. Nothing is waiting on your vigilance. Nothing will stall because you fell asleep. The night is not a gap in the work. The night is when most of it happens. Sleep and rise, night and day. The seed is not asking you how. There is peace in a thing that grows without you. Let that be the shape of the next few hours. Let us stay in the field a while longer. Let us stay under the field a while. There are no people in this part. There is only the ground. Consider a single seed in the dark. It is small. It is dry. It has been lying in the turned dirt since the morning, and nothing has happened to it yet. Above it there are a few inches of soil, and above that the night, and above that the stars. Nothing about it looks alive. Then the water in the ground reaches it, not quickly. It comes through the soil the way water moves through soil, slowly, at the pace of a thing with no urgency at all. And the seed takes it in. The dry coat softens. That is the first event, and it takes hours, and nobody sees it. There is no sound. The hard shell that kept it safe all winter loosens because it is no longer needed. Notice how quiet the beginning is. Then something splits. A pale root comes out of the seed and turns downward, because roots know down without being told. It goes into the dark, feeling its way between grains of soil, finding the small spaces. It does not hurry. There is rest in the pace of this. Nothing underground is behind schedule. Nothing down there is comparing itself to the seed beside it. The root goes deeper. It finds water and it holds on. It puts out smaller roots sideways, thin as hair, threading through the dirt. Below the surface, the plant is already larger than it will look for days. That is worth saying twice. The plant is already larger than it looks. Above ground, there is still nothing. The field is dirt. Anyone walking past would say the field is empty, and they would be describing the surface accurately, and they would be entirely wrong. The work is under the visible part. Then the shoot turns the other way. It comes up pale and bent, pushing against the weight of soil, using the strength stored in a seed the size of a grain of sand. It has never seen light. It goes toward it anyway. And one morning, there is a thin green line above the dirt where yesterday there was nothing. It did not happen that morning. It happened over many nights while nobody was looking. This is what is happening under most of your life right now. Not as a promise about outcomes, as a plain description of how slow things work. Almost nothing worth having announces itself while it is forming. It forms underground at its own speed without asking your permission. The rain comes down on the field at night. Consider that too. The water that reaches the seed does not come from the farmer. He did not carry it. It falls on the whole field in the dark while the house is asleep. and it soaks down through the soil to every seed at once. He wakes up and the field is wet. That is all he knows about it. There is grace in the ordinary shape of that. Something arrives in the night for everything in the field, without regard to which seed deserved it. The dirt does not sort them. And the field goes on doing this, whether or not anyone believes in it. It does not require a good attitude from the farmer. It does not slow down when he is discouraged. It grows in the dark at night while he sleeps. Let that be the picture for a few minutes. Cool dirt, water moving down through it, a pale root going deeper, a shoot going up, and above all of it, a dark field under stars, looking like nothing at all is happening. You are somewhere in that ground tonight. Not visible yet, not finished, not required to prove anything to anyone by morning. There is peace under a field like that. It does not need your attention. It has never needed your attention. The night is not empty. The night is when it moves. Let us go on. There is a sentence in the Gospels that this whole channel is built on, and most people have only ever seen it printed on something. Tonight, let us put it back where it happened. It was the end of a day. That matters, and it is almost always left out. The sentence was not said in a quiet room to a person who was doing well. It was said outdoors, late, to a crowd of people who had been standing all day. Picture the place first. Dry hills, low and brown, going down toward the water. A road with dust on it. Small towns close enough together that you could walk between them before dark, and people who did that walking every day of their lives. The light was going long and orange across the hills, and there were people, not a congregation. A crowd of the kind that gathers around anything interesting, in a place where very little happens. Farmers, fishermen, women who had walked in from the next village with children on their hips. They had been on their feet since morning. Consider who they were, because it changes what the sentence means. Most of them worked with their hands in the sun. Most of them owed something to someone. Many of them were sick or had somebody at home who was, and had come partly because they had heard he sometimes did something about that. They were poor and they were tired, and they had walked to get there. That is the audience, not scholars, not people with time, people at the end of a long day, at the end of a long stretch of days. And this is what he said to them. Come to me, all of you who are worn out and carrying too much, and I will give you rest. Let us go through it slowly, because every part of it is doing something. Come to me, not go and fix it, not come back when you have sorted yourself out. The first word is an invitation to move toward, not an instruction to improve. All of you, not the qualified ones, not the ones who have been faithful about it, who are worn out and carrying too much. That is the entrance requirement, and it is the only one, and it is not an achievement. The single thing you have to be in order to be included in that sentence is tired. You qualify tonight. It is not a reward. There is grace in a door that wide. That is not a small thing to notice. Most invitations narrow as they go. This one gets wider. It starts with all, and then describes the condition of nearly everyone. And then the promise, which is the strange part. He does not say he will make the load lighter. He does not say he will explain why they have it. He does not say he will show them a better way to carry it. He says he will give them rest. Rest is not a solution. Sit with that. Rest is what you give someone before the problem is solved, or when it will not be solved, or when solving it is simply not what they need at this hour. It is the same thing that happened under the tree in the desert. Elijah was not given an answer. He was given bread and sleep. These people were not offered a fix for the tax collector, or the illness, or the debt. They were offered rest. You do not have to fix it first. This is not a transaction. There is grace in that shape, and it runs through the whole night. The care arrives before the circumstances change, sometimes instead of the circumstances changing. Notice also what he does not ask them to bring. He does not ask what they did to get so tired. He does not sort them by whether the exhaustion was their own fault. There is no version of this sentence where some of them are turned away because they mismanaged it. Come to me, all of you. The crowd stood there in the long orange light with the dust settling around their feet. Some of them understood. Most of them were probably too tired to take much in, which is its own kind of truth about who the sentence was for. Being too tired to receive it well does not put you outside it. It does not close. It is not conditional. Elijah could not receive his bread well either. He ate it and went back to sleep without a word. It was not wasted on him. The light went down over the hills. They walked home, eventually in groups the way people do at dusk, along roads they knew by feel. Some of them carried children who had fallen asleep. The evening cooled. The day ended the way days end. And the sentence stayed. There is peace in a thing that stays. It is still the plainest offer in the book. It asks for nothing except the condition you are already in. You are worn out. You are carrying too much. That is the whole of what is required of you tonight, and you have it. There is peace in an invitation with no conditions on it. Let it be open beside you while you drift. Come, all of you who are tired. Rest is the thing being offered. Nothing else is being asked. Let us rest inside another story. The sentence did not end where we left it. There is a second half, and it is stranger than the first. After he offered them rest, he offered them a yoke. That is an odd thing to hand a tired person. Let us take it slowly, because the oddness is the whole point, and because almost everything about it has been lost in translation across 2,000 years. Start with the object itself. A yoke was a shaped piece of wood that lay across the shoulders of two oxen so they could pull together. It was not a decoration, and it was not a punishment. It was the ordinary equipment of farming in every village, in every field on those hills. And it was made to measure. That is the part nobody remembers. A yoke was not bought off a shelf. Someone measured the animal, the width of the shoulders, the set of the neck, and cut the wood to that shape, and shaved it down, and tried it, and shaved it again. A badly made yoke ruined an animal. It rubbed, it sat wrong, it put the weight on the wrong place, and after a season the ox was lame and useless, and a poor family could not replace an ox, so the fitting mattered more than almost anything. The wood was worked until it sat right. Notice the care in that. Someone knelt down and measured. Now hear the sentence again with that in your hands. Take my yoke upon you, he said, because mine is easy. The word underneath easy in the old language does not mean effortless. It means well-fitted, kindly, shaped to the one wearing it. He is not saying there is nothing to carry. He is saying the thing you have been wearing was cut for somebody else. Sit with that for a moment, because it may be the most useful sentence of the night. Much of what exhausts people is not the weight. It is that the weight is sitting in the wrong place. You know this from your own life. There are loads that are genuinely heavy and do not hurt because they are yours and they fit the work you are actually built for, the people you actually love. And there are lighter things that leave you raw because you took them on to satisfy someone, or because you inherited them, or because you never questioned whether they were yours to carry. The second kind is what wears an animal down. Notice what he does not say here. He does not say try harder. He does not say become stronger. There is no instruction anywhere in it about increasing your capacity. The problem is not your strength. The problem is the fit. That is grace. It asks less, not more. And there is a second thing in the picture that is easy to miss. A yoke is built for two. Notice that. It was never one animal. It is not a pack. It is not a burden strapped to one back. It is a crosspiece with two hollows in it, and the entire design assumes another animal on the other side, pulling at the same time. The older ox went on the left. That was the custom in that country. The experienced one, who knew the field and the pace, was yoked beside the young one, and the young one learned the work by being attached to something steady. He did not have to know how to plow. He only had to stay close. That was all. He was carried by the pace. That is what is being offered on that hillside at the end of the day. Not a lighter life, not the removal of everything difficult. A yoke shaped for you, with someone already in it, setting a pace you can walk at. Elijah was put in one of those in the desert. The road ahead of him was long. The story says so plainly, and it says the journey is too much for you. He was not told to find more strength for it. He was fed, and he was allowed to sleep, and then he walked it at a pace that a fed and rested person could walk. The road did not get shorter. He got the right load. He was fed first, then he walked. There is grace in that distinction, and it is worth carrying into the dark tonight. You are not being asked to become someone who can bear the thing that is rubbing you raw. You are being told it does not fit. Whatever you are wearing that was cut for another animal, the standard someone else set, the pace you never agreed to, the version of yourself you are exhausted from maintaining, it is not yours, and it never sat right. You do not have to keep it on tonight. Set it down at the edge of the field. Leave it in the grass. It will still be there in the morning if you decide you want it, and something in you already knows you will not. And rest is what comes first before any of that gets decided. The tired people on that hillside were not sent to work. They were offered rest first, and the yoke second, and in that order. Nothing was asked of them that evening except to come. Nothing is asked of you tonight either. There is peace in a weight that sits right. There is more peace in setting one down. Tonight you do not have to carry anything at all. The light went off the hills. The crowd went home along the roads in the dark. Let us go on to something quieter. There is a story sometimes told about a baker in a small village, and nobody knows whether it happened. It does not matter much either way. Let us sit inside it for a while. The village was up in the hills, a long way from anywhere. Stone houses, one road going through, a well in the middle, and a church with a bell that rang at the hours, whether or not anyone was listening. The baker lived at the end of that road. He was an old man by the time of this story. He had done the same work since he was 14, when his father did it, and his hands had gone thick and pale from flour and heat. He worked at night. That was simply the trade. Bread had to be ready in the morning, so the oven was lit around 2, and the dough was mixed in the dark, and by the time anyone else in that village opened a door, There was already bread on the shelf. He had done this for 50 years. He had made his peace with the hour. Consider what those hours were like. He got up when the whole village was at its deepest sleep, not one light in any window, the road empty, the bell not ringing anything, only the cold and the stone step and the walk of a few meters to the bakehouse. He lit the oven first, then he began. The flour went into the trough, the water went in warm. He worked the dough with his forearms because his hands had stopped being strong years ago, and he leaned into it, and the room slowly filled with the smell of a thing that was not yet bread. Outside, nobody knew any of it was happening. That is the part of the story worth staying with tonight. Above him and around him, the whole village was unconscious. The farmer who would eat his bread at 6 was asleep. The children were asleep. The woman who had been up crying at midnight had finally gone under and was asleep too. And in a low room at the end of the road, someone was working for them. Not heroically. Nobody was going to thank him. He was not doing it for gratitude. He had passed the age of expecting that. He did it because it was 2 a.m, and that is when the bread gets made. Notice how ordinary the care is. There is a story that people in that village told about him, and this is the part that may or may not be true. They said that on the nights when someone in the village had a hard time of it, a death, a sickness, a bad harvest, he would put an extra loaf on the sill of the bakehouse window, not delivered, not announced, just left out on the stone, wrapped in a cloth. And by morning, it was always gone. He never said who it was for. He never asked afterward who had taken it. He said that if a person was in a state where they needed to take bread off a windowsill at night, the last thing they needed was to be seen doing it. So he never watched the window. He would put the loaf out and then turn his back to it and go on with his work. That is what the village remembered about him, not the bread, the turning away. There is grace in being fed without being watched. Elijah had that in the desert. He woke, and there was bread on the stones, and no one standing over him, waiting to see how he took it. Nobody asked him to say anything about it. The care was left, and the giver stepped back. That is grace. It does not stand there watching. The old baker worked through the dark hours. The dough rose in the warm corner, and he shaped it, and the oven took it, and the smell came up through the whole end of the road. And still nobody woke. That is the whole picture, and it is a good one to sleep in. You are in the village. It is the middle of the night. You are unconscious, and you do not know anything about what is being prepared. And the work is being done anyway. Somewhere out of your sight, at an hour you are not awake for, by someone who does not need you to notice, the bread for tomorrow is already in the oven. You do not have to supervise it. Your only work tonight is rest. You do not have to be grateful yet. You do not have to know who is doing it. You do not even have to believe there is a bakehouse at the end of the road tonight. It is enough to be asleep in the village. Rest is the only thing being asked of you. Toward morning, the old man opened the shutter. The sky over the hills had gone from black to a dark blue, the color that comes before any real light. He set the loaves out on the shelf. He put one on the sill as he sometimes did, and turned his back on it. Then he sat down on a stool by the cooling oven. He rested there. The village he had fed slept on for another hour, knowing nothing about any of it. There is peace in that room. Let it be the room you are in. Let us go on to something quieter still. There is a lamp somewhere burning right now that nobody is looking at. Let us stay with that. There are no people in this part either. There is only a small light in an empty room. Picture the room first. Stone walls. A stone floor worn smooth in the places where people walk. High windows with nothing in them but dark. The air cool, the way stone rooms are cool at night, holding the temperature of the day before. And one lamp low down burning. It is not a large light. It does not fill the room. It makes a small warm circle on the floor and a long soft shadow behind everything near it, and the corners stay dark. Nobody is in there. Everyone who tends it has gone. They went hours ago. They put out the other lights and closed the door and walked home in the cold, and the room went quiet. The lamp stayed on. Notice that this is the whole of it. Nothing else happens in this part. A small flame in an empty room all night with no one to see it. It does not go out when the room empties. That is worth sitting with. It is not burning because someone is watching. It does not need an audience to keep working. The light does not know the difference between a full room and an empty one. It simply burns. Consider how steady a flame like that is. There is no wind in a stone room. The flame stands almost straight, with a faint, slow movement at the top, the way a small fire moves when nothing disturbs it. It leans a little and comes back. It leans and comes back. Hours of that. The oil goes down very slowly in the bowl, so slowly that you could watch it for a long time and see nothing at all change, and come back near morning and find that it had. That is the pace of the whole night. Outside, the town is asleep. The road is empty. Somewhere a dog. Somewhere the wind moving over the roofs and going on. And in here, the small steady light. There is rest in a thing that does not need you. Most of what we carry is the sense of being needed for something to continue. If you stop paying attention, something goes out. If you stop holding it up, it falls. The lamp is not like that. You could sleep for 8 hours, and it would burn the whole time. You could forget the room exists. You could never have known about it at all, and it would still be there, making its small circle on the stone floor at 3 in the morning. Nothing depends on your knowing. That is grace in the plainest form the word has. Something kept alight all night for no reason you arranged, in a room you are not in. Elijah slept under his tree with no idea what was coming. He did not know about the bread. He did not know anything was near him. He was unconscious in the dirt, and the care was already on its way, and his not knowing changed none of it. The lamp does not need to be believed in. Let the picture stay simple. Cool stone, high dark windows, one small flame standing almost still, leaning and coming back, and the oil going down so slowly it looks like nothing is happening. The night passes over the room. The dark in the windows goes from black to a deep blue, very gradually, over hours. The stone begins to take the first gray. The corners of the room start to have shapes in them again. And the lamp is still burning. It burned the whole time you were asleep. It asked nothing. It did not falter in the middle when nobody checked. There is peace in that room tonight. You do not have to keep anything alight. Something is already burning, quietly in a place you are not, and it will still be burning in the morning. Let it burn. Let yourself go under. Let us go on. He pointed at birds once, in the middle of talking, and told people to look at them. It is one of the few times in the Gospels where somebody stops and points at something ordinary that everyone can see from where they are standing. "Look at the birds," he said. "They do not plant, they do not harvest, they do not gather anything into barns, and they are fed." Let us stay with that a while. Picture where he said it. A hillside above the water, in the middle of the day, with the dry grass and the low trees, and birds, because there are always birds. Small brown ones going through the grass, and larger ones turning slowly a long way up. He told them to watch. That is a strange instruction inside a serious conversation. People had come with real problems: debts, illness, occupation, the tax on the harvest. And he said, "Look at the sparrows for a minute." Notice that he does not say the birds have it easy. That would be a lie, and everyone standing there knew it. A bird's life in that country was short and thin. They spent the whole day finding food. Many of them did not survive the winter. He is not saying they are carefree. He is saying something narrower and much stranger. He is saying they are not carrying tomorrow. The bird works all day. It works hard. But when the light goes, it stops, and it goes into a branch, and there is nothing in its head about the next day at all. It does not lie awake planning. That is the whole distinction, and it is the one that matters at this hour. The bird has labor. The bird does not have dread. Most of what keeps a person awake is not today's work. Today's work is finished. It got done, or it did not. The thing sitting on your chest at 2 a.m. is almost always tomorrow, or next month, or a version of next year that has not happened and may never happen. You are carrying a load that has not arrived. The birds do not do that. They cannot. They have no barn, no store, no arrangement for the future, and the story says plainly that they are fed anyway. Notice how he ends it. He does not say that worry is a failing. He does not tell them to stop feeling what they feel. He asks a small practical question instead. Has worrying ever added a single hour to anyone's life? It is almost gentle, the way it is put. Nobody is being scolded on that hillside. They are being shown something. There is a whole economy going on around them, in the grass and in the air, that runs entirely without storage and does not collapse. There is grace in the plainness of it. He does not argue anyone out of anything. He points at a bird and lets the bird make the case. That is the same tone as the desert. No lecture, no correction, just something set down in front of a tired person. Elijah was fed like a bird, in fact. That detail sits in his story too. Earlier, before the tree, he had been kept alive in a dry place by food he did not grow and did not store, brought to him. He had no barn either. He was fed daily, and only daily. There was never a stockpile. There was only enough. That is grace. It comes daily, and it comes. That is worth carrying into the dark. Enough is a different thing from secure, and it is the thing most people are actually given. You are not going to solve tomorrow tonight. You could stay up for it. People do. You could spend the next 4 hours going over it, and in the morning tomorrow will arrive exactly as it was going to, and you will meet it with less than you have now. The dread does not prepare you. It only spends you early. Let the birds have the night off and take it with them. Picture them now, because this is a good place to rest. It is dark on the hillside. The grass has gone still. In the low trees, small birds are sitting with their feathers out and their heads turned back, not doing anything at all. They have no plan for the morning. There is peace in that branch. They are not worried about the morning. They will wake when the light comes, and start again, and the day will be what it is, and they will be fed, or they will look longer. That is all any of it ever was. There is peace out there in those branches tonight. It costs nothing, and it is not earned, and it does not depend on knowing how anything turns out. Let tomorrow stay where it is. It is not here yet. There is rest available in the meantime. Let us stay on this hillside a little longer. He pointed at the ground next, at the flowers in the grass, and said something about them that is easy to hear wrongly. Consider the lilies, he said. They do not work, they do not spin thread, and not even a king in all his clothing was dressed like one of these. Let us take that apart slowly. These were not lilies in the way we mean the word. They were the small wild flowers that come up across those hills after the rains, red and purple and low, all through the grass for a few weeks in the spring. They were everywhere, and they were free. They were also, and this matters, completely temporary. In that country the grass came up green, and then the dry season arrived and burned it brown in a matter of weeks, the flowers with it. People cut the dead grass and burned it in ovens. That is what he said next, and it sounds harsh until you understand it as a plain fact about the fuel supply. The flowers lasted a few weeks and then went into a stove. And they were dressed better than a king. Now here is the thing I want to stay with tonight, and it is different from the birds. The birds are about provision. This is about something else. Nobody was watching those flowers. They came up on hillsides where no one lived. They opened in the grass in places a person might walk past once in a season, or never. They were extraordinary, in enormous numbers, in the middle of nowhere, for nobody. And they were still that beautiful. Their beauty was not a performance. It was not produced for an audience, and it did not increase when someone admired it, and it did not diminish on the hillsides no one ever crossed. They did not spin, they did not labor, they did not earn what they looked like. Notice how completely that removes the usual arrangement. We are used to a world where what you are given corresponds to what you produce. You work, and there is a result, and the result is roughly proportional. That is the arrangement most people live inside their whole lives. The flowers are outside it entirely. They did nothing. They were given everything, and no one saw most of it. There is grace in that, in the exact sense the word has. Something extravagant, given freely to something that did not work for it and could not have. You may need that tonight more than you need the birds, because there is a particular exhaustion that comes from being valued for output, from the sense that your worth is a number that goes up when you produce and down when you cannot, from lying in the dark at the end of a week where you did not manage much, doing the arithmetic. The flowers do not do arithmetic. They are not more valuable in a field where someone is looking. A person asleep and doing nothing is not worth less than the same person working. That is not a nice sentiment. That is the argument he is actually making on that hillside, using flowers, to people who worked with their hands for very little. He is telling them what they are worth outside of what they produce. Elijah was in exactly that position under the tree. He had stopped producing anything. He had walked away from all of it. By any measure of usefulness, he was worth nothing that afternoon, and he said so himself. He said he was no better than the ones before him. He was fed as though none of that counted, because none of it counted. There is peace available in that, if you can let it in. You are not being assessed tonight. Nothing about your value is being recalculated based on how this week went. The flowers on the empty hillside are the picture. Nobody there, nothing owed, color everywhere, for a few weeks, for no reason and no audience. Let it be like that for a few hours. The grass on those hills is dark now. The flowers are closed and folded in on themselves the way they do at night, low down among the stems, out of sight. They are not doing anything. They will open again when the light comes, or they will not. And either way, nothing about them has to be justified to anyone. There is rest in a thing that does not have to prove itself. You are allowed to be that tonight. Let us go on and go quieter still. There is a story he told about a man with 100 sheep, and one of them wandered off. Most people have heard some version of this. Let us slow it all the way down, because the pace of it is the whole meaning, and the pace is almost always lost. Start with the shepherd. He was not a gentle figure in a painting. Shepherding in that country was low work, done by people with no land, often by the youngest son or by someone hired. He slept outdoors. He smelled of animals. He was not respected by anyone in town. He had 100 sheep, which was not many. They were not his, most likely. He was answerable for them. Every one of them was somebody's livelihood, and his own wages depended on bringing them all back. He counted them at evening. That was the practice. Notice how ordinary it is. You brought the flock in toward the fold as the light went, and you counted them through the gate, and you knew the number before you sat down. It was the last thing done in a day of walking. And on this evening, the number came out at 99. Now consider what happens in a person at that moment. Not panic. He had done this for years. But a small tightening and a going back over the day in his head. The last stretch of hillside, the place where the ground broke, and there was a gully, the middle of the afternoon when they had spread out along the ridge. He would have had a guess about where. And the light was going. That is the part of the story that gets skipped. This is not a search that begins in the morning when it is convenient and safe. It begins at dusk. He left the 99 and he went back out. Let us stay right there, because this is the sentence the whole thing hangs on. He went out, in the dark, onto ground that was dangerous at night for one animal when he already had 99 safe behind him. The arithmetic did not favor it. Any sensible person would have said so. 99 is a good night's work. 1 is a small loss, and it is written off, and you go back for it in the morning if you go back at all. He went that night. Now think about the sheep, because this is where the story stops being about someone else. A sheep does not run away. That is worth knowing. It is not a decision. It puts its head down to eat, and it takes a step and another, following the grass, and it does not lift its head for a long time. And when it does, everything is unfamiliar. There is no moment of rebellion in it anywhere. There is only grazing and drifting, and then a sudden late understanding that the flock is not there, and the light is going, and it does not know which direction anything is in. That is how most people get lost. Not dramatically, not by deciding. By following the immediate thing, one small step at a time, over a long enough period, until one day you lift your head and do not recognize where you have ended up. You may know that feeling from this year. And here is what a lost sheep does. This is documented behavior, and it is the saddest and most useful detail in the story. It lies down. It does not search for the flock. It does not retrace its steps. When a sheep is separated and frightened, it finds a low place, and it lies down, and it stays there, and it will not move. Sometimes it makes a sound. Often it goes silent. It cannot save itself, and it does not try. It waits in a hollow in the ground in the dark, and the only thing that will change its situation is somebody coming. Elijah lay down under a tree in a wilderness. That is the same picture, and it is not a coincidence. The Bible uses this image constantly, and it uses it because everyone in that world had seen an exhausted animal do exactly this. He walked until he stopped, and then he lay down, and he could not get himself out. Neither can you, some nights. That is not a defect. Now back to the man on the hillside in the dark. He is walking the ground he covered that afternoon in reverse, slowly. He is going along the gully. He is stopping and listening, which is most of what searching at night actually is. The hills are black. The wind is moving in the scrub. He calls, and then he waits, and then he moves further along and calls again. Hours of this, nothing that resembles the tidy story people imagine. He is not angry. That is worth saying plainly, because most of us assume otherwise. There is nothing in the story about the shepherd being furious, or about the sheep having to answer for the wandering when it is found. He is just looking. There is peace in that. Nothing in him is building a case. And eventually, the story does not say how long, and it does not matter. He finds it in a low place, lying down, unable to get up. Notice what he does then. He does not drive it home. He does not put a rope on it and pull it back the way it came, which would be the ordinary way to move an animal. He picks it up and puts it across his shoulders. That is the detail that has kept this story alive for 2,000 years. A grown sheep is heavy, and the hills are broken, and the walk back is long, and he carries it the entire way. The sheep does nothing. It could not walk anyway. It is simply carried. In the dark, over rough ground, by someone who came out when the arithmetic said not to. It rests on his shoulders. There is peace in being carried. There is grace in that, and it does not require anything from the one being carried. That is the whole point of the picture. The animal is not asked to participate. It is not asked to be sorry, or to explain, or even to be capable of walking. Its entire contribution is to be found and to be too tired to resist. You are allowed to contribute exactly that tonight. And the story ends with him coming into the fold with it on his shoulders, and the sound of the other 99 in the dark, and setting it down. Nothing is said about the wandering. That is grace. It skips the conversation entirely. Let that be the picture as you drift. The dark hillside, the listening. Somebody out on the ground you got lost on, walking slowly, calling and waiting, in no hurry at all, and not going home without you. You do not have to find your way back tonight. You do not have to signal. You do not have to get up out of the hollow. You do not have to know which direction the fold is in. You only have to rest. There is rest for the one being carried. That has always been the arrangement. Let us go on to another road. There is a story about a father who watched a road for a long time. We are going to stay entirely with the father tonight. The son has his own version of this story, and it is not the one for this hour. Tonight, we are only going to stand where the old man stood. Picture the house first. A farm on a rise with olive trees and a wall and a low flat roof you could climb onto. Below it, the road going down toward the valley and away east, the direction people left in. From that roof, you could see a long way. The younger son had gone. That is all we need to say about it tonight. He asked for what was his, and he took it, and he went down that road and around the shoulder of the hill and out of sight. And the father began waiting. Consider what that waiting was actually like, because the story compresses it into a few words, and it was probably years. There was work to do. There was a whole farm and another son and a household, and the seasons came and went, and the olives were harvested and pressed, and none of that stopped. He did all of it, and he watched the road. Notice how ordinary that combination is. This is not a man sitting in a chair staring at the horizon. This is a man doing the harvest with one eye going, again and again, to the place where the road comes around the hill. You may know that particular kind of waiting, the one you carry underneath the day, the phone left face up on the table, the looking without meaning to. Every time a car slows outside, it does not stop you from working. It just never entirely goes quiet. He did that for a very long time. And here is the sentence in the story that everything turns on, and it is easy to read past. While the son was still a long way off, the father saw him. Stay with that, still a long way off, a figure at the edge of what a person can make out, down where the road comes around the hill, too far to be sure of anything. And he knew immediately. You only recognize someone at that distance if you have been looking at that spot for years. He knew the shape of his own son at the limit of vision because he had checked that piece of road 10,000 times. The watching is the love in that sentence. Nothing else is doing the work. And then he ran. That is the part that scandalized everyone who first heard this story. An older man of standing in that culture did not run. He walked. Running meant pulling up your robe and showing your legs, and it was undignified, and a man in his position simply did not do it in front of the village. He ran anyway, down the road, in front of everyone. Notice what he did not do. He did not wait on the roof to see what kind of state the boy was in. He did not stand in the doorway with his arms folded and let him walk the last stretch alone. He did not require an approach. He closed the distance himself. The son covered part of the road, and the father covered the rest, and they met somewhere in the middle of it, well before the house. And then the story says he embraced him. Before anything was said. That is the order, and the order is the entire meaning. The arms came first. Whatever the boy had prepared to say on the walk home, he had not said it yet. He was held before he explained himself. There is peace in that order. The speech does come in the story. He starts it. He gets some of it out, the part he had been rehearsing on the road for days. And the father talks over him. Not harshly. He simply turns to the household and starts asking for things. For a robe, for sandals, for a meal. The prepared speech is left unfinished in the middle of the road because nobody needed to hear it. The explanation was never the price of coming home. There is grace in that, in the plainest sense the word has, and it is the same grace that was under the tree in the desert. Elijah had a speech too. He had lain down and said the worst of it, that he had had enough, that he was no better than anyone before him, and nothing argued with him, and nothing corrected him, and what arrived instead was bread and permission to sleep. Neither man had to finish making his case. That is worth carrying into the dark tonight. Whatever you have been rehearsing, the explanation for how this year went, the account of yourself you have been assembling at 2 in the morning, is not required at the door. Nobody is waiting for it. You do not have to arrive in good condition. You do not have to have the words ready. You do not have to walk the last part of the road on your own. Let the picture settle. Evening on a hillside, olive trees going gray in the low light, an old man on a flat roof who has looked at the same bend in the road for years, and who is going to look at it again tomorrow, and who would have kept looking for as long as it took. The road is still there tonight. Nobody is standing at the end of it with their arms folded. The distance is being closed from the other side at a run, undignified, before you are anywhere near the house. There is peace in not having to explain yourself. Let that be the last thing you hold. You are met early. You always were. There is rest for you well before the door. Let us go on and go slower still. There is a small scene in one of the Gospels that takes place entirely inside a house, and nothing happens in it at all. That is why it belongs here. 2 sisters, a visitor, a meal being prepared. It is the most domestic scene in the book, and it is over in a few sentences. Let us go in slowly. The house was in a village outside the city, on the far side of a hill, the kind of place people stopped at on the way somewhere else. It was not a wealthy house. Hospitality in that world was not optional. That is the first thing to understand, or the scene makes no sense. When someone came to your house, you fed them properly, and the standard was not casual. A household's name depended on it. There was a great deal of work in it. Water carried, a fire built up, bread made from the beginning, because bread was made every day and not before it was needed. Something killed, possibly. Vessels washed, all of it by hand, all of it at once, for a guest who had arrived with others. The older sister did all of that. Her name was Martha, and the house appears to have been hers. She was doing what any competent person does when people arrive. She was making it happen, in the back, at speed. And her sister sat down. Mary went into the front room where the visitor was, and she sat on the floor, and she stayed there. She did not carry water. She did not touch the fire. She sat and she listened. Notice that she is not idle. She is simply not in the kitchen. Consider how that would have looked from the other room. Martha is working. She can hear the talking. Every time she passes the doorway, her sister is still sitting there, doing nothing, while the meal for all these people is not going to make itself. Anyone would feel what she felt. She came out eventually and said so. Not to her sister, to the guest, she said, "Do you not care that I am doing all of this alone? Tell her to help me." Notice that sentence. Do you not care? We have heard it already tonight. It is what the men in the boat said when the water was coming in. It is underneath what Elijah said under the tree. It is the same sentence in a kitchen. That is worth sitting with for a moment. This is not a story about a lazy sister and a busy one. This is a story about someone who has been working very hard and has arrived at the end of what she can hold, and who finally says so out loud. She is exhausted, and she is not wrong about the work. The work was real. Someone did have to make that meal. Nothing in this story pretends the tasks were imaginary or that she was making a fuss. And what she is told is very gentle. He says her name twice, first of all, Martha, Martha. In that language, saying a name twice is not a rebuke. It is the way you speak to someone you are about to say something tender to. Then he says she is worried about many things. Not wrong. Worried He does not tell her the meal does not matter. He does not tell her to work less or be more spiritual. He names the state she is in accurately, which is a thing almost nobody does for a tired person. And then he says one thing is needed. That is the whole of the correction, if it even is one. One thing is needed. He does not list it. He does not turn it into an instruction she has to go and carry out. He simply says, the sitting is allowed. It is not a reward. There is grace in a house that lets you sit. That is the sentence for tonight. Somebody sat down in the middle of a house full of work, and somebody else came out and said she should not be allowed to. And the answer was, she is allowed. There is grace in a house like that. Because most of us are the older sister. Most of us have a running list of the things that would have to be finished before we could reasonably stop, and the list does not run out, and so we do not stop. You have one tonight. There is something you did not get to today. There is something waiting for tomorrow. And underneath that, there is the sense that rest has to be earned by completion, and that the completion never comes. Nothing in this story requires the meal to be finished first. Mary did not sit down after the work was done. She sat down while it was undone, in a house where people needed feeding, and nothing came to make her get up. Elijah lay down with everything unfinished too. The road ahead of him was still there. Nothing he had walked away from had been resolved by his lying down under a tree, and he was fed and allowed to sleep in exactly that condition. Unfinished is an acceptable state to rest in. That is the only thing either story is trying to say. The meal is not made, the road is still ahead, the list is not done and will not be done tonight. Sit down anyway. You do not have to finish. There is peace on the floor of that room. Let the house be the picture. The lamp lit in the front room. Voices low, not saying anything urgent. Someone sitting on the floor with their back against the wall, doing nothing at all, and nobody coming to make them get up. There is peace in that room. You are not needed in the kitchen tonight. Nothing waits on you until morning, and some of it will still be waiting after that, and that is allowed too. There is rest available in the middle of the undone thing. It always was. Let us go out onto the road now and walk a while. There is a story about two people walking home in the evening, and it is the quietest story in the book. Nothing dramatic happens on that road. Two people walk. Someone joins them. They talk. That is nearly all of it. Let us walk it with them. The road went from the city out to a village, and it took a few hours on foot. It was an ordinary road, stone and dust, going up over a rise and then down through low hills, with olive terraces on the slopes. They set out in the afternoon. They were leaving. That is the thing underneath the whole scene. Something had gone very badly in the city over the previous days, and whatever they had gone there hoping for had not happened. They were going home because there was nothing to stay for. Consider the way two people walk when that is the situation. Not fast. There is nothing to arrive for. The pace of people who are only walking because the walking has to be done, with the sun going over on their right and their shadows getting longer ahead of them on the road. They were talking about it as they went, turning it over, going back through what had happened the way people do, saying the same things to each other again in slightly different words, because that is what the mind does with something it cannot make sit right. You know this walk. It is the drive home after the bad meeting. It is the long conversation at 11 at night that goes around 3 times and lands nowhere. It is the same 6 thoughts in a loop while your feet keep moving. They had hours of that ahead of them. And somewhere on that road, someone came alongside and started walking with them. The story says something remarkable at this point, and it says it plainly. They did not recognize him. He walked with them for hours, and they had no idea who it was. Stay there for a while, because that is the entire gift of this story, not the ending. The hours in the middle, on an ordinary road, with company they could not identify. They were not alone for any of that walk. There is peace in that, even unrecognized. They believed they were. They felt exactly as alone as 2 people walking away from a disaster feel. Their experience of that afternoon was loneliness, and their experience was wrong. Notice that the story does not treat their not knowing as a failing. Nobody says, "You should have recognized me." Nobody blames them for walking hours beside something they could not see. It is simply what happened, and it is told without any reproach at all. You may not recognize what is walking beside you tonight either. That is not a test you are failing. It is the ordinary condition of being on a road at the end of a hard day. The company does not depend on your ability to identify it. And what does the companion do on that walk? He asks them what they are talking about. That is how it starts. He does not announce anything. He asks a question, and then he listens to 2 exhausted people explain their disappointment at length. He lets them tell the whole thing. Notice how unhurried that is. That is worth noticing in a story about someone who supposedly already knows. He does not shortcut it. He does not say, "I know, skip ahead." He walks beside them at their pace and lets them say all of it out loud. There is grace in being allowed to tell it. The sun went further over. The shadows went long across the road. The hills went from green-gray to gold to a dusty violet, the way they do in that country in the last hour. And they came near the village. The story says he made as if to go further. He did not assume the invitation. He came to the turning and kept walking, and it was up to them. They asked him to stay. Because it was nearly evening, they said, and the day was almost over. That is the reason they gave. Not a theological reason. It is late and you should not be on the road. So he came in with them. That is grace. It waits to be asked and comes gladly. And what happened then took no time at all. They sat down to eat, and he took the bread and broke it, and in that second they knew. It was the hands. It was something in the way it was done. And then he was not there, and they sat in the room with the bread on the table and the door open onto the dark, and they said to each other that their hearts had been burning the whole way, and they had not known why. The whole way. Not at the end. During. On the road in the loop of the same 6 thoughts, in the hours they thought they were walking alone. Something had been happening the entire time, and they only learned about it afterward. Elijah slept through his own version of this. Something came near him in the dark and left bread, and he did not see it arrive. He was unconscious for the part that mattered. It happened anyway. He woke to bread. He ate and went back to rest. You are on that road tonight. Going over it again, not arriving anywhere, too tired to recognize anything, walking at the pace of someone with nothing to hurry for. You are not walking it alone, and you do not have to be able to tell. Let the picture be the last of it. A dusty road going up over a rise, long shadows, 2 people talking quietly about a thing that did not work out, and a third set of footsteps beside them the whole way. There is peace on that road, even when nobody knows it. Let your heart burn quietly. You do not have to understand why tonight. There is rest in being accompanied without recognizing it. Let us go back now toward the tree. There is a story sometimes told about an old woman in a coastal town, and like the baker's story, nobody knows whether it is true. Let us sit in her kitchen for a while. The town was small and built on a slope with the harbor at the bottom and the houses going up the hill behind it in rows. Her house was near the top, stone, with a red door and 2 rooms. She had lived in it for 60 years. Her husband had been a fisherman and had died a long time before this story. Her children had grown and gone the way they do in towns like that, to cities inland where there was work. She lived alone and she was not lonely, or if she was, she did not say so. The story is about her door. She never locked it, not at night, not when she went out, not in the winter when the town was empty and the wind came up off the water and there was nobody on the streets at all. People told her she should. Her neighbors brought it up regularly the way people do. There had been a break-in 2 streets down. She was an old woman on her own. It was not sensible. She said she knew. Notice that she did not argue with them. And she went on not locking it for years, and the reason she gave when anyone pressed her is the whole of this story. She said, somebody might come at night. That was it. That was her explanation. She did not mean a friend dropping in. She meant what she said, that somewhere out there, at some hour, there might be a person who needed to come in and could not knock. Notice how specific that is. A locked door is not only a door that stops people, it is a door that requires something of them. You have to knock. You have to wake someone. You have to stand outside in the dark and announce that you need help before you are given any. She had decided that was too much to ask. So the door stayed unlocked, and the kettle stayed on the back of the stove, and she went to bed every night in a house that anyone could walk into. Consider what that meant in practice. Almost every night, nothing happened. That is the part worth staying with. For years and years, the door was open onto nothing. Nobody came. She woke up in the morning, and the kitchen was exactly as she had left it. She kept doing it anyway. There is peace in a habit like that. The story says that a handful of times over those years, somebody did come. A young man from the harbor once in a bad way, who sat in her kitchen until it got light and never explained himself. A girl who had walked up from the road. Somebody in the winter she never identified, who had used the chair by the stove and left it warm. She did not ask any of them anything. They came in and they rested and they left. That is what the town remembered. Not that the door was open, that she never afterward mentioned who had come through it. She did not tell anyone. She did not look for them in the street. There is grace in a door like that. It costs nothing to walk through. It does not require you to explain what brought you. It does not need you to be in a fit state, or to have a good reason, or to say anything at all when you sit down. You only have to get to it. And on the nights when nobody came, the door was still unlocked. That is the part that makes this story worth telling at this hour. Its being open did not depend on being used. She was not waiting up. She was asleep in the back room. The kitchen was dark, and the stove was warm, and the door was unlatched. And all of that was true, whether or not a single person in that town needed it that night. Elijah walked into a wilderness with nothing arranged. He did not send word ahead. He did not ask anyone for anything. He lay down in an empty place at the end of himself, and something was already prepared for him there. The provision was in place before he arrived at it. That is the same shape. The door was open before anyone came up the hill. The bread was baking before the village woke. The lamp was lit before the room emptied. None of it waited to be deserved. That is grace. It is in place before you arrive. You may need to hear that as you go under tonight. Nothing about your welcome is being decided right now based on how you have been. It was settled long before you got here. There is nothing to knock on. Come in and rest. Let the kitchen be the last picture before we go back to the desert. Stone floor, a stove going down to embers, a chair beside it, the lamp out, the old woman asleep in the other room, the sound of the sea a long way below, and the red door unlocked all night for nobody in particular. For you, if you happen to need it. There is peace in a house you do not have to earn your way into. Let yourself be inside it now. There is rest here. There always was. Let us go back to the tree. There is a story about a woman in a crowd who did not want to be seen, and it is the most careful story in the book. Let us go into it slowly because everything in it happens in a few seconds, and almost all of it is interior. She had been ill for 12 years. That is the first thing, and it is worth sitting with before anything else. Not 12 days, 12 years of a condition that did not improve, through every remedy anyone offered her, until whatever money she had was gone. She had spent everything, and she was worse. You may know some version of that arithmetic, the years of trying things, the money spent on solutions that did not solve it, the slow arrival at a place where you stop expecting anything to work. That was where she was. And there was a second thing, which the story assumes everyone understands, and which we have to be told. In that world, her illness made her ritually unclean. That was not a verdict on her character. It was a status. It was a category in the law about who could enter which spaces. It had nothing to do with anything she had done. But the practical effect on a life was enormous. She could not go into the places of worship. She could not be touched, and anything she touched became unclean too, and anyone she touched had to go and wash. For 12 years, every ordinary human contact had a consequence attached to it. Consider what that does to a person. Not the illness, the arrangement around the illness. 12 years of being a problem that spreads. 12 years of keeping back from people, of not sitting where others sat, of a whole town knowing. She had learned to move through the world without touching it. Notice how tired that is. 12 years of it. And then there was a crowd in the street, because someone had come through the town, and everyone was pressing in around him. She went into it. Notice what that cost her. She was not supposed to be in a crowd at all. Every person she brushed against on the way in was, by the rules of that place, being made unclean by her. She went anyway, and she went from behind. That detail is in the story, and it is the heart of it. She did not go around to the front. She did not stand in his path. She did not call out the way other people in these stories call out. She came up behind him in the press of people, because she had worked out an arrangement in her head, and the arrangement was this. If she could just touch the edge of his clothes, that would be enough, and nobody would ever have to know it was her. That is the whole plan. Touch the hem, take what she needed, leave unseen. Consider how much is in that plan. It is not a lack of belief. She believed enough to go into a crowd she was forbidden from entering, What she did not believe was that she could ask for it out loud in front of everyone as herself. She wanted the help without the exposure. You may recognize that. Most people do. There is a particular kind of need that you would take gladly if you could take it anonymously, and that you will go without rather than stand up in a room and name. That is why people listen to something like this at 2 in the morning. It asks nothing back. There is rest in that. So she reached out in the crowd at the level of the ground, and she touched the edge of the cloth, and something changed in her body immediately. And then she began to move away. That was the plan working. She had what she came for. Nobody had seen. In another few seconds, she would have been out of the crowd and back into her life, carrying it in secret. And he stopped. He stopped in the middle of a busy street with people pressing in on every side, and he asked who had touched him. Now stay very carefully with what happens next, because the whole meaning is in the manner of it. His companions thought the question was absurd. There were dozens of people touching him. They said so. He kept asking anyway. It would be easy to hear that as exposure. She certainly heard it that way. The story says she came forward frightened and shaking, and fell down in front of him and told him the whole thing in front of everyone. The thing she had spent 12 years avoiding. But look at what he actually does with it. He does not ask her to explain why she came from behind. He does not say anything about the rules she had broken to be in that crowd. He calls her daughter. That is the first word out of his mouth, not a correction. A family word, said out loud in a street, to a woman who had not been called anything of the kind in 12 years. And then he tells her to go in peace. Consider why he stopped her at all then. She would have got away with it. She would have been well and secret and still alone. He stopped her so she would not have to leave as a thief. That is what the pausing is for. She had come in believing that the only way to receive anything was to take it without being noticed, and he refused to let her go on thinking that. She was not caught. She was noticed. There is grace in the difference. There is a difference between those, and it may be the most important difference in the whole night. To be caught is to be found out and dealt with. To be noticed is to be seen and named and told to go in peace. There is grace in the second one and no fear in it at all. Elijah was noticed like that under his tree. Something came to him in a wilderness where he had gone specifically so that nobody would find him. He had left his servant behind. He had walked a full day into an empty place to be unseen. And he was found and fed and not asked a single question. He did not have to come forward and explain. She did, and it turned out to be the best thing that happened to her that day, because she left with a word instead of only a secret. You are not hiding successfully tonight. That is meant kindly. Whatever you have not said to anyone, whatever you would only take if you could take it anonymously, it is already known, and the knowing has no edge on it. You can stop managing how you are seen. Rest instead. Nothing here is watching you. Let the picture be the last of it. A crowded street, dust, a woman going out through the edge of the crowd with her head down and being stopped and standing there shaking, and being called daughter in front of everyone and sent away in peace. There is rest in being seen without being exposed. That is what is on offer tonight. Let us go on to the ones who were carried. There is a story about 4 men who took a roof apart, and it is the funniest story in the book, and also one of the kindest. Let us take it slowly. There was a house in a lakeside town, and it was full. Someone was teaching inside, and the room was packed, and there were people standing in the doorway and out into the street. Nobody could get in or out. That is the situation. An ordinary house, one main room, a crowd well past what the space could hold, and more people arriving. And somewhere out in that street, there were 4 men carrying a 5th. He could not walk. The story does not say how long or why, and it does not matter. He was carried everywhere he went on a mat by whoever was willing to take a corner. Consider what that means about his life. He went where he was carried. He arrived when someone had time. Everything about his day depended on other people being willing, and he had presumably spent years being aware of exactly how much of a burden he was. That is its own kind of exhaustion. You may know a version of it. Needing help you did not ask to need. The arithmetic of how much you are costing the people around you. The quiet decision to ask for less than you actually require. He would have been used to that. And on this day, 4 people picked up the corners of his mat and carried him across town and got to the house and found they could not get in. Notice what they did not do. They did not say they would come back tomorrow. They did not put him down at the edge of the crowd where he could hear from a distance. They did not tell him it was not going to work out today. They went up onto the roof. Roofs in that country were flat and they were used. You dried things up there. You slept up there in the summer. There were outside stairs on most houses, going up the wall. So they carried him up the stairs. 4 men and a mat and a staircase built for 1 person at a time. That alone would have taken a while, and it would not have been graceful, and the man on the mat was awake for all of it. And then they started pulling the roof apart. The roof was branches and reeds packed with dried mud across wooden beams. It was made to be repaired because it always needed repairing after the rains. It came up in pieces. They made a hole in somebody's house. Stay with that for a second. There is a crowd of people below listening to something, and dust and dried mud start falling on them. Then light. Then the hole gets wider. They did not ask permission. The story never says whose house it was. It never says anyone objected, or that the 4 men apologized, or that they came back later to fix it. That entire question is simply absent. Nobody in the story cares about the roof. And then they lowered him down. 4 men on the edge of a hole, letting a mat down on ropes into a crowded room, slowly trying not to drop him. He came down into the middle of it. Consider his position through all of this. He is not doing any of it. He was carried across town, carried up a staircase, laid on a roof while it was dismantled around him, and then lowered through a hole in front of a room full of strangers. He did not lift a finger at any point. That is the picture I want you to hold tonight. Not the healing that comes after. The being carried by people who would not accept a closed door on your behalf. There is grace in having friends like that. And here is the sentence in the story that has kept scholars busy for a very long time, and it is worth hearing plainly. When he saw their faith, he spoke to the man. Their faith, not his. The story does not tell us one thing about what the man on the mat believed. It never asks him. He may have been full of hope, or he may have been past all of it and simply going where he was put. What moved things was the belief of the people carrying him. Sit with that for a while, because it may be the most useful thing in the whole night for someone who is running on empty. You do not have to have any faith left tonight. It is being carried for you by people who prayed for you years ago and have forgotten they did. By whoever is holding a corner of your mat right now without your knowing about it. By the ones who came before, who believed things on nights like this and are not here to be thanked. You are being brought in on somebody else's strength. That is grace. It arrives on other people's legs. Notice how little the man contributes. He is the only person in the scene doing nothing at all, and he is the one the whole thing is about. That is allowed. That is the arrangement. There is peace in it. Elijah was in that position under his tree. He had no belief left that afternoon. He had said as much. He was not carried across a town, but he was found and fed and got up eventually on strength that came from bread he did not make. Neither man got himself there. There is rest in that, and it is the deepest rest in the episode. You are not the engine of this. You have not been for a long time, and things have kept moving anyway. Let the picture stay. A flat roof in the sun. 4 men on their knees at the edge of a hole they made, holding ropes, leaning over to watch. Dust in the light, and below a room full of people looking up, and a man on a mat coming down slowly into the middle of them. He did not ask to be brought. He was brought. There is peace in being carried by people you cannot see. Let that hold you now. Let us go back to the desert, and to the tree, and to the man who slept there. Let us go back now to the desert, and to the small tree, and to the man asleep underneath it. He is still there. Nothing has been asked of him yet. We have been away a long time, on a lake, in a field, on a road, at evening, in a kitchen, on a roof. All of those stories were saying the same thing in different rooms. Now we come back to the one they belong to. The night is nearly over out there. Consider the desert in the last hour before light. The cold is at its deepest then. The sand has given up all the heat it held. The stars are still out, but they have gone thin, and the sky along one edge has begun to lose its black. The small tree stands where it stood. And under it, a man who walked a full day to get away from everything, who said he had had enough, who lay down without resolving one thing. He had been fed twice while he slept. That is what happened in the night. No conversation, no correction. Nothing about the running or the leaving or the words he lay down with. Only a hand on his shoulder twice, and warm bread on the stones, and water, and permission to go back to sleep. And then the morning came. He got up. That is all the story says, and it says it without ceremony. He got up, and he went on, and he walked a very long way. The text says 40 days, which in that language means a long time and a hard road. And here is the line that matters. He went in the strength of that food. Not in the strength of a new resolve, not because his outlook had improved overnight, and not because anything about his situation had changed. The threat behind him was still real. The road ahead was still too long. He walked on bread he did not make. He did not earn it. He only ate. Sit with that for a moment, because it is the whole architecture of the night, stated in one line by a book written 3,000 years ago. The strength came from outside him. He had none left. He had said so, accurately, and nothing in the story ever contradicted him. He was not talked into finding more. He was given something to eat, and then he could walk. Notice the order one last time. Fed first, rested first, not corrected, not instructed, not asked to account for himself, not required to feel better about anything before he was cared for. The care came first, and the road came after. We get this backwards almost every day of our lives. We think we have to find the strength, and then we will be able to rest. We think we have to fix the situation, and then we will deserve to stop. This story runs entirely the other way. The stopping came first. The sleep came first. The bread came before there was any road at all, and the road only became walkable because of it. You are in the first part tonight. Not the walking, the lying down, and the being fed, and the sleeping again. That is the part you are in, and it is not the preliminary to the real thing. It is the thing. Consider what he was carrying as he walked. Nothing had been solved. He was still the same man who had run. He still had every reason he had lain down with. The difference between the man under the tree and the man on the road was not insight. It was 2 meals and some sleep. That was all. That was enough. There is grace in how ordinary that is. Whatever changed in him did not come through understanding. It came through being cared for at the level of a body, in the dark, without being asked anything. That is available to you tonight. Not the answer, not the plan for the morning. The other thing, the sleep, and whatever quietly arrives while you are unconscious, which you will not see happen and do not have to. He did not see it either. He slept through the part that mattered. And notice what the story does not do at the end of it. It does not say he was grateful. It does not say he understood. It does not record him saying one word about the bread, then or later. He ate it and he walked. That was enough. You do not owe anything for tonight. You do not have to wake up transformed. You do not have to make good on the rest you are taking. There is no ledger being kept on the other side of this, waiting for you to justify the hours. He got up and went on, and nobody ever mentioned it again. The light came up over the desert behind him as he walked. The cold went out of the air slowly. His shadow went long ahead of him on the ground, the way it had 2 days before when he was walking the other direction. The small tree stayed where it was. It is still there in the story, empty now, a low desert shrub on a stony rise with a patch of flattened ground underneath it where a man slept twice. Nothing about that place was remarkable. It was the worst afternoon of his life and the ground under a scrubby tree, and it turned out to be where he was fed. That is usually how it goes. The care does not arrive somewhere impressive. It arrives where you actually are. That is grace. It comes to the tree you reached. There is rest under that tree tonight, and it does not belong to him anymore. It is a place in the story you can lie down in. There is nothing there that will ask you for anything. You are held there the way he was held, fed without explaining, allowed to sleep twice. There is peace under that tree. Stay in it a while. Let us stay there now until the end. There is no one in this last part. There is only the place. Let us go back to the desert one more time at night and stay there without anybody in it. The ground first. Stone and sand cooling, the heat going up out of it and away. A few low gray plants holding on in the cracks, the kind that live on almost nothing. Small stones. Flat ground worn smooth by weather. Nothing is moving down there. Notice how still it is. The tree stands where it has always stood. It is not a large tree. Thin branches, small hard leaves, a trunk no thicker than an arm, growing out of stone in a place with almost no water. It has been there a very long time. Consider how little it takes to keep a thing like that alive. Almost no rain, almost no soil. It does not grow quickly, and it does not grow tall, and it has never been remarkable to anyone passing. It simply continues. and it throws a patch of shade in the afternoon, which is the only shade for a long way in any direction. And that turned out to matter enormously to somebody once. Now the air. It is cold and very dry and completely still. There is no wind at this hour. Nothing is stirring the leaves. The cold sits close to the ground the way it does in open country. The sky above it is entirely open. There are more stars out there than anyone can take in. In a place with no towns and no lamps, they come down all the way to the edges, thick across the middle, and they turn very slowly through the night without any sound at all. They have been doing that for a long time. Notice how little any of it needs attention. The stars do not require anyone to watch them go over. The tree does not need anyone to note that it is still alive. The night does not depend on being witnessed by a single person anywhere. It all simply goes on. There is rest in that. There is rest in a place like that. Not comfort exactly. It is a hard place, and nothing about it is soft. But there is a deep steadiness in it that a room cannot give you. Nothing out there is in a hurry. The dark holds the whole desert at once, the near stones and the far hills and the flat ground under the tree, all of it held in the same quiet for hours without effort. You are somewhere inside that tonight. Not in the desert, in your own bed, in your own room, in whatever town you are in, and whatever hour it is showing, but held by the same steadiness, in the same way, without having done anything to arrange it. There is grace over that ground. It was there before anyone lay down under the tree, and it was there after he got up and walked away. It did not begin when he arrived, and it did not end when he left. It is what the place is made of. The night goes on over the desert. The stars move a little further west. The stone gives up the last of its warmth. Somewhere far off, a small animal moves and stops and moves again. The tree stands still with its thin branches out. And the flat patch of ground beneath it waits, the way it always has, for anyone who walks that far and cannot go on. There is peace there tonight. It is a very old piece, and it does not belong to anyone. It was there before the story, and it is there now. It asks nothing. It notices you without wanting anything from you. You are held in it. Let the desert be the last place, cold, open, entirely quiet. A small tree on a stony rise under a great many stars, nothing being asked, nothing being watched for. Just the night going on around the tree. We have come to the end of our time together tonight. You do not need to remember any of this. Not the man under the tree, not the bread on the stones, not the road or the boat or the open door. None of it was for keeping. If nothing has stayed with you, that is completely all right. If you drifted off somewhere in the middle and heard almost none of it, that is all right too. Nothing tonight was a test. It was only company. If you are still awake at this hour, thank you for staying. If you have already drifted off, thank you for that too. This was always meant to reach you that way. Either way, you were not alone in it. You did not have to be well tonight. You did not have to be strong or grateful or finished with anything. You were allowed to be this tired, and you still are. You are held. You are not alone. Sleep well, and thank you for joining us here at Midnight Chapel.